HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Dead Man's Hand, Crime Fiction at the Poker Table. Edited by Otto Penzler. Read by Keith Sellon-Wright, Leon Nixon, and Gail Shalan. Forward. The biggest surprise about putting together a collection of stories combining poker and crime is that it has not been done before now. If ever a subject begged to be associated with crime, it is gambling, and if you think poker doesn't involve gambling, you are 7 years old and think it's fun to play for matchsticks. For most of my long life, I've played a little poker and always considered it a participatory form of entertainment and pleasure, unlike, say, horse racing, which is best enjoyed as a spectator sport. I don't know about you, but I'd be reluctant to climb aboard one of those 7-foot-high half-ton beasts as it careers along at 1,000 miles an hour, at least. Poker is a game that seems at its best when played with friends who laugh at your witty repartee as you laugh at theirs. There has to be some money involved, of course, enough to hurt a little if you lose, enough to add some spring to your step if you win, but not enough to change your life forever in either direction. I have played in a monthly game for about 20 years, making me one of the newcomers among the group that started nearly 50 years ago. Players have come and gone, of course. Of the originals, 2 have died, 1 moved to Florida, which is the same thing, 1 to California, and a few have merely drifted away. Some friends of the core players joined for a while and dropped out to be replaced by newcomers like me. It's a friendly game with most of the guys, and it's all guys, whether by design or happenstance or custom, taking turns as host, the biggest change being that, somehow, beer has been abandoned in favor of Diet Coke and ice water. With minor variations, this is how I've always known the game of poker in my mind's eye. We're not that different from the players who sit around the table in The Odd Couple. One will bet on every hand, no matter what he's been dealt. Another is more interested in telling stories and listening to them than in playing. A member of the game for about 30 years still asks at least once a night if a full house beats a straight. One deals as if each card had a different and peculiar shape, inevitably dropping cards to the floor and dealing some face up when they should be down, and vice versa. Still another bets each card in 7-card stud, as if his son's college education depended on it. One plays so badly that if he says he can't make it to the game, we offer to have a limousine pick him up. Like so many other elements of life with which I was once familiar and comfortable, poker has changed. 20 years ago, if someone had been invited not to play poker but to watch it, he would have asked to be shot instead as a more humane method of execution than being tortured to death. Today, of course, telecasts of big-money poker are ubiquitous, hugely popular, and admittedly addictive. The great players, those with mountain spring water instead of blood and a giant ball bearing in the place where others have a heart, used to ply their skills clandestinely, slipping into a town, cleaning out the local hotshots, and skedaddling before they realized they had been taken by a professional card sharp. Now they are like rock stars, though they wear clean clothes and take baths. Even occasional televised poker viewers recognize Johnny Moneymaker, Annie Duke, Howard Lederer, Johnny Chan, Phil Hellmuth, and Amarilla Slim. There is a lot of money involved in the World Series of Poker and other televised events, and there are high-stakes games in Las Vegas, various Indian casinos, and in the back rooms of bars across the country. And the total gambled in these venues is dwarfed by the staggering sums wagered on internet poker, which is like crack for compulsive gamblers. Where a lot of money is involved, can crime ever be far behind? In the case of poker specifically and gambling in general, defining crime is as easy and sensible as drawing to an inside straight. In what must be regarded as Orwellian doublespeak or the height of cynicism, there are laws on the books of every state that make it a crime to gamble for money. There are far more venues in which it is permitted to place a wager in Las Vegas than there are in New York, for example, where it's a lot easier than in Utah, where it's pretty much outlawed. Okay, you figure. While you may not agree with the law or like it, you understand the concept, which is to protect those who can least afford to lose their hard-earned food and rent money. While those who see it as a form of moral depravity may be a trifle zealous, federal and state regulations against alcohol, at one time, and drugs, currently, and cigarettes, imminently, were also passed for what is perceived as the common good. But there is a lot of money involved, so some clever politicians, in consort with those who stood to gain, made an occasional exception. It was horse racing in some states. Bingo and charity gambling nights received some exemptions. Certain cities in Nevada, then New Jersey, and can the rest of the country be far behind, licensed gambling casinos. Perhaps the most pernicious exceptions are the state-run lotteries, which spend fortunes advertising. The odds against winning the big prize are astronomical, but it's not very expensive to buy a ticket, or 2 or 3, every week, year after year. So the poor plunk down their precious dollars as TV, radio, and newspaper advertising exhorts them to play again and again. Hey, you never know. Lotteries are a tax on the stupid. The greedy politicians who promote them, wanting always more and more tax revenue, smirk at how cleverly they got away with it. Off-track betting parlors fall into a similar sewer of moral cynicism. Many years ago, when I worked in the sports department of the New York Daily News, I bet, oh, the shame, on sports and horse racing. I knew my bookie, who used his profits to send 2 kids to Notre Dame and who talked me out of a couple of bets that were beyond my means. He was at risk of being arrested at any moment of any day. The OTB Emporium 2 blocks away flourished as subway and television advertising pimped the glories of betting, just so long as it was with a state-run gambling enterprise. How then are these state-run gambling establishments worse than the mafia and other hoodlums who make gambling opportunities available to those who want it? Okay, I'll concede that the governor won't knock on your door in the middle of the night and break your arms and legs. But then the crooked noses don't broadcast commercials telling you what a great idea it is to put the rent money on your lucky number, either. Poker is quite a different kettle of fish from playing a number or putting down $20 on some horse running in a $6,000 claiming race at a distant racetrack, of course. A poker player relies on getting some good cards, without doubt, but also on knowing what to do with them. Understanding a little about the odds, trying to keep track of which cards have been played, reading your opponent's faces and body language, makes it a test of skill as well as nerve. Those smart dudes and dudesses on ESPN and virtually every other channel, it seems, winning hundreds of thousands or even millions at Texas Hold'em, don't become legends because they're lucky, although that is an element of poker, as it is in life, that should never be discounted. There are some smart dudes and, yes, dudesses in the following stories, and as in real life, some excruciatingly stupid ones. There are some you wish could be in your regular poker game, and some you pray will never ask to be dealt in. The writers who brought them to life are among the most distinguished of their era. The moneymaker, Duke, Lederer, Chan, Helmuth, and Amarillo Slim of the mystery writing world. You've already tossed in your ante. So, enjoy the game. Otto Penzler. Introduction. For well over 150 years, poker has been America's table game of choice. The mere mention of the game would conjure images of Mississippi riverboat gamblers, cowboys willing to shoot a man if he thought his opponent had an ace up his sleeve, and brazen Vegas hustlers drinking whiskey and smoking cigars while using marked cards to take the unsuspecting. While there may be a little truth to these bygone notions, over the last 150 years, poker has become inextricably woven into the fabric of the American experience. The game has been played by American presidents and Supreme Court justices. Grandmothers teach their grandchildren how to play on the kitchen table. I'm betting on Grandma. Friends use it as an excuse to get together each week to drink a few beers, curse their bad luck, and, most important, strengthen the bonds of friendship that can be so fragile. 10 years ago, the New York Times reported that 50 million Americans played the game at least on a monthly basis. With all this in mind, one shouldn't be amazed that the game has become such a popular form of television programming. In 2003, the World Poker Tour brought whole-card cameras and high production values to televised poker. Later in that year, the aptly named Chris Moneymaker, a Tennessee accountant, turned a $40 online entry into a seat at the $10,000 buy-in main event of the World Series of Poker, where he beat 839 of the best poker players in the world to become world champion, while pocketing $2.5 million. These two events combined to make poker an overnight media sensation. Of course, within a few months, those same media were already predicting that the poker fad was bound to fizzle in, at most, a year. They failed to realize that poker never gets old. Playing and watching the game always will fascinate because it is more about the people you're playing with than the cards you're dealt. Poker is simply a vehicle that facilitates human connection. Two office mates might learn more about each other in a single evening of spirited poker play than they would in a year of shared meetings and tepid hellos at work. Long before 2003, poker had already worked its way into our language. Colorful, often-used phrases such as blue chip, bottom dollar, pass the buck, above board, and square deal can trace their origins to poker. A game that has so firmly entrenched itself in a culture's psyche is not likely to burn out anytime soon. Poker has even spawned a rich tradition of nonfiction. Al Alvarez's The Biggest Game in Town is a classic, and more recent books like Jim McManus's Positively Fifth Street and Michael Craig's The Professor, the Banker, and the Suicide King point toward a bright future in the poker nonfiction category. Until now, however, poker fiction has been nearly non-existent. With this in mind, Otto Penzler assembled a staggering array of crime novelists and asked each of them to weave the great game of poker into an original short story. John Lesquin writes a story about how the memories of a father's home poker game still haunt the son many years after his death. Rupert Holmes tells a tale of a poker game that is more than it appears. Eric Van Lustbader shows how the game can form the basis for a unique father-daughter relationship. Walter Mosley examines how the game of poker can provide a unique platform for nonverbal communication. And Sam Hill examines a poker pro coming to grips with his own mortality, both physically and professionally. These are just a small sampling of the stories you will find inside the collection. There were few rules for each writer. How they used the game to further the narrative was entirely up to them. And the results prove that poker fiction can consist of much more than the typical tale full of poker cheats and conmen. Clearly, each author has had a different experience with the game, and that experience shines through in unique ways in each story. Poker's varied forms and attributes are all utilized differently by each author. Dead Man's Hand ultimately ends up creating a mosaic of the game that will, hopefully, change how fiction writers use the game in the future. It's a fresh approach that was a long time coming. Whether you are a poker enthusiast, a crime novel aficionado, or both, curl up with this collection of exciting single-sitting stories, and you will be rewarded with an array of bluffs, gut shots, and surprise river cards. Enjoy. Howard Lederer.
Mr. In-Between by Walter Mosley. "You can call me Master," I said to the white man behind the broad ivory-colored desk. The stretch of 59th Street, known as Central Park South, lay far beneath his windows. The street was filled with toy-sized yellow cabs and tiny noonday strollers. "Come again?" Clive Ford bristled in his oversized chair. "That's my name, Master Vincent. My mother christened me so that no man could insult me without lowering his own head." "Is there something else they call you?" Ford asked. I eased into the wide-bottomed walnut client's chair and crossed my legs. I didn't like Ford. He had watery eyes and was short and fat with stubble on his chin. I felt that a man, despite his liabilities, should make the most of himself. And appearance was the easiest blemish to cover. When I looked in the bathroom mirror, I didn't see a handsome or even a good-looking man. Tall and gawky, more gray than brown-skinned, I had big ears and an overbroad nose. But at least I wore nice suits that made me look filled out and hats that partly hid the insult of my Dumbo lobes. "Call me Mr. In-Between," I said. "It fits my nature and my vocation." "Your what?" "Job." "Oh, yes. That's why you're here, isn't it?" I wondered how a man like Clive Ford got to be the vice president of some big corporation when he looked like a warthog and didn't even know simple everyday words. "I have a friend who needs a favor," Ford said. "What friend?" "That's not important." "To whom?" "Say what?" Ford asked. "To whom is the identity of your friend unimportant?" "You don't need to know his name." Ford showed irritation at my continued impertinence. I shrugged. "My friend is owed a great deal of money by a man who wants to pay but who also needs his anonymity." Now that's a big word. I gazed out of the window, down across Central Park. It was a beautiful sunny office and a lovely summer's day. "All we need is for you to attend a private poker game in Brooklyn Heights and win." "I can play, but I can't promise to win." I put my hands on the arms of the chair, indicating that it was time to go. "Game is fixed. You use this." He threw down 2 tight bundles of what looked to me to be $100 bills each. "And when the night is over, you take either $10,000 or 10% of the winnings. Whatever's more. You don't have to worry about the game being fixed. My client will repay any losses by the other players." I settled back into the chair. I'd promised Felicia a trip in October, and my funds were low. There was my emergency cash, but that was inviolate. Then again, I'd have to look long and hard to find another woman like Felicia. She didn't mind my odd hours or sporadic, sometimes day-long absences. "I trust you, baby," she'd say in her high voice. "But you got to treat me right." "How's the game fixed?" I asked Clive Ford. "By an expert," Ford said. "All you have to do is play and bet heavy if you have more than 2 of a kind." "Deuces?" "If it's 3 2s in your hand, you're going to win." "Probably." "How much?" "No less than 100 grand. I didn't like it. But the ugly man was referred by Crow, and Crow was as good an agent as you could have. Still, Clive Ford was ugly and didn't care who knew it. If that was what he was like on the surface, what might there be hidden underneath? "Why don't you exercise?" I asked him, unable to keep the disgust out of my tone. "What?" "Why don't you go to a gym? You got something wrong with your legs?" "What the hell does that have to do with the game tonight?" "Bernardi told me that you were a professional." "I carry things from one set of hands to the other. I deliver, but I don't work for just anybody. My references are good. Play the game, take your winnings, and bring them back to me tomorrow." "What if I lose?" "You won't." I hesitated a moment past the comfort zone of a normal conversation. "Besides," Ford said, "you're covered by Bernardi. He's the one I go to if anything goes wrong." I had never met Bobo Bernardi. He was an ex-professional wrestler who had gone into the private delivery business. He only contacted me through Crow. Crow had a one-room office on 146th Street near Malcolm X. That office was the highway on-ramp that led from Harlem to the rest of the world. "Take this job as a gift," Crow had whispered over the phone. "It's the best paying gig you ever gonna get." $10,000 was a good payday, and cash was the cleanest package to carry. It wasn't like prescription drugs or stolen property. It wasn't like counterfeiters' product or stock market tips that couldn't be trusted to electronic media. Real money was clean, something the cops could question, but they could not legally confiscate. "We're not talking counterfeit here, are we, Mr. Ford?" "Clean American currency, master." I knew then that Ford was no fool. He saw my vein spot as soon as I told him my name. We spent the next 40 minutes going through the details of the pickup. Pick up, drop off. These were the two terms that bound my world, the bookends of my entire professional life. If an FBI agent wanted to speak to a prostitute he'd gotten fond of, I would deliver the Valentine. If an informant deep within a criminal organization needed a line out, I was his connection. With Crow as the router, Mr. In-Between was the express mail system for a dozen or more shadow worlds. There was nothing that I wouldn't move except for slaves, the condemned, and terrorist communiques. "I'm not an assassin or an assassin's helper," I told my intern, Mike Perrone, a youngish New Yorker of Peruvian descent. "But what if it was a message to some CIA guy in Cuba to wipe out somebody down there?" Mike asked. "No. Once you open that door, then anything and everything goes." Mike nodded once and filed the information away. He would make a good bagman one day. I had a loft apartment in Tribeca that didn't require rent. I'd once done a favor for the landlord, Joe Moreland, which had earned me a lifetime get-out-of-rent-free card. The ceilings were 18 feet high, looming over 3,000 square feet of mostly empty space. I like space. One of my favorite pastimes is to stare out over the empty bamboo floor of my home. At the front corner of the loft, I walled off 400 square feet for an office. This was where Mike and I worked. We could gaze out of the fourth-floor window onto Greenwich Street and discuss the best ways to go about a problem. Not that I had any difficulty forming strategies. It's just that sometimes I needed an extra pair of hands, and it was always good to see how someone else would go about getting from point A to point B. And Mike had other qualities. He spoke Spanish and street, and he was small, with a New World Indian look about him. Nobody would ever suspect him on a sophisticated run. "Why are you going to take this job?" Mike asked that afternoon as 3 fire engines blared past on the street below. "It's good money, and Crow asked me to do it." "But you're like a shill." "Crow says it's not like that." "When I'm gonna meet this Crow?" "When you learn to speak proper English," I said. "I know how to talk." "Good. Now all you have to do is implement that knowledge, and the windows of the world will open for you." Mike glared at me, but he didn't argue. He knew that I was the doorway to his dreams of dignity, wealth, and respect. He didn't even have a high school diploma when I found him hustling for nickels in East New York. Now he'd earned his GED, and no one had stabbed him in over 2.5 years. "You got that address?" I asked him. "Yeah." "Check it out and follow procedure." "If there's trouble ahead?" "Blue cell." I gave him the new number. I had 3 pay-as-you-go cell phones, each one of a different primary color. I changed the number on one of these phones every month. When I made a change, I'd tell Mike which one to call. After Mike left on his errand, I went into my apartment and lay down on the chaise lounge I'd bought from my psychoanalyst at the end of 6 years of deep therapy. I'd spent 5 days a week on that brown backlit sofa. I bought it for $18,000, telling my analyst, Dr. Myra Golden, that I'd use it when I felt the need to tap into my unconscious mind. I lay down and closed my eyes, thinking about Clive Ford and his mission. The more I thought, the more I worried that the whole thing was a mistake. Pick up, drop off. That was my mantra. This poker playing lay outside my area of expertise. But Crow had asked, and $10,000 was heavy cash for a day's work. The red phone made the sound of Zen bells in the distance. Hello. Hey, baby, how you doing? Felicia. You know it make me dizzy when you say my name like that, Master, Felicia said. I told you that you don't have to call me that, girl. How can I help it? She said in a serious tone, when I know every time I say it, your dick gets hard. That's only when I'm looking at you, baby. Is it hard right now? Why are you calling me? I allowed her question to seek its own reply. I want a steak and to see if we can do something. Felicia was 23, 15 years my junior. She was a large woman from Bedford-Stuyvesant. Felicia had worked part way out of the hood. A junior cashier at a grocery store in the village, she was the least likely girlfriend I could imagine. One day I was buying chicken breasts and broccoli at her register, and she asked, "You cook for yourself?" I said yes as I looked up, falling into her eyes. She said she'd be off at 9 and that I could buy her dinner if I was there. I got a job tonight, baby, I told Felicia. A job or another girlfriend? A job. A job so good that we can go to Hawaii for a week on your vacation. Really? No lie. Felicia had a very large butt. I'd always liked skinny women, but somehow I found myself waiting for her at 9, and we've been together since. I stretched out on the psychoanalyst's couch after that first night of deep, passionate sex with Felicia. Lying there, I could hear Dr. Golden saying, "Go with it," which was odd because Golden had never given me one word of advice in 1,440 hours of therapy. "What is it you do again?" Felicia asked. She had posed that question many times, and I always gave the same answer. I'm an assistant to a guy who hangs out on a corner up in Harlem. I help him, and he gives me advice. Oh, can he give you the night off? I got an itch that I want you to scratch. With your tongue. My chest throbbed, and I wanted to say, I love you, but stifled the urge. I did not understand this feeling Felicia brought out in me. She was undereducated and used crude language. She was completely unsophisticated. But still, when she looked at me, I wanted to get down on my knees and thank God, even though I had been an atheist since the age of 8 after seeing my parents brutally murdered. I have to go, Felicia. I have to get ready for the job. I might have to go see my old boyfriend then, she speculated. I've told you before, honey, if you need another man, just leave. You don't even need to tell me that you're gone. Don't be like that, Daddy. I'm just playing with you. You don't have to get all serious and shit. You're wrong, girl. I am serious. Very serious. Okay. We see each other tomorrow night then, all right? As long as you're not with your old boyfriend. What was his name? Hatton. George Hatton. You remember that? I remember everything. The game was to be held on the top floor of a private brownstone on Montague Street near the water in the Heights. I arrived at 11:45 in order to be there for the first hand to be dealt at midnight. I was met at the door by 2 big men armed with electronic wands. "Excuse me, Mr. Vincent," the sandy-haired one said, "but we have to make sure you're clean." They took my blue cell phone, removed the battery, and put them both in a box. They also searched my wallet, made me take off my jacket so they could feel through the fabric, and asked me if I wore glass.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?